Hello, friends and fellow seekers. Welcome back to the Law of One Spiritual Advice podcast. My name is El, and today we'll be talking about will and faith and the archetype of the fool, what it means to have faith in the next step, sacrifice, using your catalyst in a faithful way, and how it provides strength. So, will and faith are synonymous with each other. They basically mean the same thing. In our current experience of third density, we are challenged to enact a certain level of faith in order to graduate from this density and evolve. There is the finite path of proving things, and there is the faithful path of non-proof or belief. Coming from someone who has a fairly scientific thinking mind, this was always a challenge for me to step beyond the realms of the known into the unknown. Such is the nature of the universe and infinity that relying only on what you can see and touch and feel lacks the spirit of intuition and recognition of the infinite possibilities in any moment. In today's podcast, I will attempt to describe what faith is and how we can use it to progress along our path. So let's start with a quick and easy example from session 65.12 about the container in the store. So in 65.12, Ra mentions, although you have many items which cause distress and thus offer seeking and service opportunities, there is always one container in that store of peace, love, light, and joy. This vortex may be very small, but to turn one's back upon it is to forget the infinite possibilities of the present moment. Could your planet polarize towards harmony in one fine, strong moment of inspiration? Yes, my friends, it is not probable, but it is ever possible. End of quote. So you could probably just sum it up right there with saying, it is not probable, but it is ever possible. So for me, like I said, the sort of scientific thinking mind type person, I was always good at school and math and calculus and all that fun stuff and proving things and writing them down in formulas. It makes a lot of sense to me to quantize things and to say, oh, this is very probable and this is not probable. So, faith is sort of, in the face of the 99% or 99 dark containers within the store, it's just recognition that there is that one container in the store, that 1% maybe that contains infinite possibilities, love, harmony, joy, etc. And the scientific mind wants to say, well, that's stupid, right? Why would you even focus on that one container when there's all these 99? Like, they clearly outnumber all of the good things. And that's absolutely true. But in my opinion, you're not going to be able to recognize that one container in the store and utilize it and, attempt to open it at the very minimum if you just aren't aware of it or you don't have the faith to know that that is a possibility. The infinite possibility of the moment means that, yes, you could have that 1% success, that 1% of love and faith and joy and harmony that can radiate out into the universe, which they go on to talk about faith and proof in session 3.9. They mentioned briefly, faith is perhaps one of the stumbling blocks between those of what we may call the infinite path and those of the finite proving/understanding. End of quote. And when I talk about this, right, I'm not trying to discount completely the proving/understanding/finite path. I mean, it does have its place in our density, in our third density experience. We do need to be somewhat attuned with reality and the finiteness of reality and those 99 containers in the store that are dark. We don't want to just completely turn our back on them and only pretend that one positive container can be opened. However, once again, it's just the recognition that infinite path, that sort of infinite container does exist and not forgetting about it, because we are in third density, which is the density of sort of darkness and shadowland, and it is so very easy to forget about that one container, that infinity, that faith that can give us the strength to carry on, to move forward, beyond the sort of many doubts that we may have in our mind, which can manifest in a sense of hopelessness, right? So with faith comes hope, and with faith also, you're having faith in the possibility of a positive outcome. And I have another quote lined up for you, how they talk about how, when we have difficult catalysts, difficult experience in our life, faith will give us the strength for the mentally exhausting process of accepting things such as, in this example, they'll talk about anger. So in session 46.9, Ra mentions the entity polarizing positively perceives the anger. This entity, if using this catalyst mentally, blesses and loves this anger in itself. It then intensifies this anger consciously in mind alone until the folly of this red ray energy is perceived not as folly in itself, but as energy subject to spiritual entropy due to the randomness of energy being used. This is the important part. Positive orientation then provides the will and the faith to continue this mentally intensive experience of letting the anger be understood, accepted, and integrated with the mind-body-spirit complex. The other self, which is the object of anger, is thus transformed into an object of acceptance, understanding, and accommodation, all being reintegrated using the great energy which anger began. And I'll stop there for a moment. So that is the positive seeker, right? So if you're listening to this, I'm going to make the assumption that you are on the service to others path and you're not on the negative service to self path, which seeks to control instead of to accept. And so, why would you want to accept the anger from, yourself and from others? Well, that's what this path is about. It's about acceptance. And it's not that we control things and force them into our vision. What we want to do is accept them, and with that acceptance comes transformation. And that transformation can come in many forms, but I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, the transformation of consciousness where you were having this anger and you see it as a sort of block. Well, now you have somewhat accepted and loved it to the point where it has shown you something, and you can learn from the lessons that have been so difficultly been given to you. So they continue on here. For the negatively oriented mind-body-spirit complex, we'll use this anger in a similarly conscious fashion, refusing to accept the undirected or random energy of anger, and instead, through will and faith, funneling this energy into a practical means of venting the negative aspect of this emotion so as to obtain control over the other self or otherwise control the situation causing anger. Control is the key to negatively polarized use of catalyst. Acceptance is the key to positively polarized use of catalyst. Between these polarities lies the potential for this random and undirected energy creating a bodily complex analog of what you may call the cancerous growth of tissue. End of quote. And so you may see here the control versus the acceptance, the two sort of paths. And yes, between those two paths, if say you do not use your catalyst at all, you just sort of fumble from one thing to the next, not really going towards control or towards acceptance, not choosing a path, well then, your body has a mechanism to sort of catalyze you into one of those two choices, and at worst case scenario, remove you from this illusion, as they have so eloquently stated at the very end there with the random growth of tissue. And I don't want you to get too scared about that. I know that's a pretty heavy thing to learn and understand, but I mean, just to make it easy, right? Acceptance is the key to positively polarized use of catalyst, but attaching this back again to faith, the faith gives you the strength to make it through this intensive, exhausting process of acceptance of anger. And acceptance of whatever it may be, right? Anger is just an easy one to use. In our situation here, there's lots of things to be angry, confused, upset about. And so shall we control those things and force them into our vision? Or shall we try to love and accept them and share truth with them in hopes that, there's a sort of more positive vision can come into manifestation? And so whenever we talk about faith, there is these things called archetypes. It's a very complicated thing to describe archetypes to someone, especially when you only sort of understand them yourself. But I can quickly do it. There's I think 21 archetypes, just like there are the 21 tarot cards. In my understanding, those were originally created for the understanding of the archetypes, each one being a portion of the mind or whatever. But basically, the archetypes are, when this universe was created, it's almost like a blueprint for thinking, or a blueprint for characters in a way that you can sort of embody in your seeking. In other words, when you're doing anything at all, you are pretty much embodying, one of the 21 archetypes, or, maybe many of them at one time. But so I think the 21st archetype, I think it's the last one maybe, but they call it the Fool. And so the Fool is a wonderful one. You've seen the picture of the tarot card with the Fool. He's like some guy with a bag, and I think usually a dog following him, and they're walking towards a cliff, and it looks like he's about to step off the cliff. So why would you want to step off the cliff? Well, the idea with faith is that, in the seeming hopelessness of those 99 containers in the store, right, you still have the faith to make that step and say, even recognizing that there's that one infinite possibility that this, positive manifestation can happen. However, it usually takes the faith of the seeker to increase the will to a point that magic can manifest, because faith and the manifestation of that positive thing are connected quite dearly, and that it sort of needs it needs faith in order to manifest. It needs the seeker who is aware of these types of things to bring it into being. So when they talk about the fool, it's often symbolized as them walking off the cliff, and the idea is that even though they take that step into mid-air and it doesn't look like there's anything that's going to be able to be under their foot on the next step, well, at the very last second, something picks them up and provides them the footing to move into the next step. So in session 67.30, Ra mentions, one great aspect of this archetype, in other words, the fool, is the aspect of faith, the walking into space without regard for what is to come next. This is, of course, foolish, but is part of the characteristic of the spiritual neophyte. End of quote. And so you see, right, they say it is foolish. Of course it's foolish. It's sort of somewhat ignoring the 99% of that darkness and just hoping that 1% will manifest. But, it is the sort of way of this third density, in my understanding, that only those who have that faith are able to even graduate from this experience. It's almost like the test that we have to take in some time in this world, in whatever form. Obviously, I don't mean literally stepping off a cliff. Please, for the love of God, understand this is symbolism and not to take it literally. So since I mentioned that, it is one of the tests of this third density, to even make it from this third density, we do need some sort of faith. And we can even talk about the cross and how this sort of works into things too. I'll mention that after. But first, I want to talk to you about how without faith, the threshold of moving from this third density to the next fourth density, or whatever your next experience may be, is not possible without that faith. So in session 82.29, Ross states, the necessity for graduation to fourth density is an ability to use, welcome, and enjoy a certain intensity of the white light of the one infinite creator. In your own terms, at your space-time nexus, this ability may be measured by your previously stated percentages of service. And they kind of mentioned it earlier. I'm not going to bring it up. It's not a big deal. Prior to the veiling process, the measurement would be that of an entity walking up a set of your stairs, each of which was imbued with a certain quality of light. The stair upon which an entity stopped would either be third density light or fourth density light. Between the two stairs lies the threshold. To cross that threshold is difficult. There is resistance at the edge, shall we say, of each density. The faculty of faith or will needs to be understood, nourished, and developed in order to have an entity which seeks past the boundary of third density. Those entities which do not do their homework, be they ever so amiable, shall not cross. It was this situation which faced the logo eye prior to the veiling process being introduced into experiential continuum of third density, whatever the last part, doesn't really matter. Those entities which do not do their homework, be they ever so amiable, shall not cross. So, my friends, this is once again the difference between the finite and the infinite path. The finite path is one of only understanding third density. And it's not to say that that's wrong, right? The finite path is somewhat true, but since we are in a sort of density of oneness, we have to understand that the infinite path is also true. So, we need to step beyond the proving, the understanding, the things that we can only see with our third density eyes and touch and feel. Those are all good and well, but there is something bigger and larger and infinite about this universe out there. And if you do not, have the, as they say, faculty of faith or will needs to be understood, nourished, and developed. So if you, try to understand, nourish, and develop your faith, then, when you get to that boundary where you walking those steps of light and you walk as far as you can until the light becomes too intense, and then you stop, And you're either in third density or you're in fourth density. No matter how close you are to the edge of third density moving into fourth, if you are stopped at the very end of the steps of third density and you don't have the faith to cross over to the fourth density, well then that's it, and you get to repeat the third density and fun stuff, right? So there's no hate in that either. The creator gives you infinite time to figure out your things, and free will of this universe, it will push you, your catalyst will push you towards making one of these choices of, enacting faith or not being faithful and only relying on the things that you can see. And that is your choice, my friend. However, it's good to understand these things so that we don't become hopelessly lost. And I can actually talk about being hopelessly lost. They have one thing here. So we don't want to be hopelessly lost, and we don't want to be caught up in the karma of third density, of exchanging anger for anger, and getting and creating karma, and right, being consciously unloving. So we must be we must enact our foolhardiness and bravery in being faithful, so that we can deal with the very many difficult things of third density that tempt us to, to give slight for slight and things of that nature, and fall into the control aspects instead of the acceptance aspects. So in session 12.28, the questioner asks, are most of these from fourth density? What do they come from? And the questioner is asking about the sort of wanderers, or what you may call or know of as star seeds, basically like entities that come from higher densities and incarnate in third density. And so Ra answers, few there are of fourth density, and we are in the third density, so few there are of fourth density. The largest number of wanderers, as you call them, are of sixth density, which is the density of unity. The desire to serve must be distorted towards a great deal of purity of mind and what you may call foolhardiness or bravery, depending upon your distortion complex judgment. The danger of the wander is that it will forget its mission, become karmically involved, and thus be swept into the maelstrom from which it had incarnated to aid the destruction. End of quote. So, you may be a wanderer, you may not. It's honestly not even terribly important, because once we are in this third density, we are somewhat all the same. We are somewhat equipped with the same sorts of lessons and whatnot. And so, they say the danger of us coming here is that we may forget our mission. We may forget that this is about acceptance and love and understanding, and we may become karmically involved by trying to finitely prove everything and to give anger for anger and slight for slight, and try to control everything instead of accept things. And thus we are swept into the maelstrom, in which we had incarnated to avoid. And so this just brings up a thought, which is that how, because what they're saying is that we're trying not to be swept up in karma, and because karma is something that is like, it's like something that we holding on to, something that inertia has been put into place, and to stop that inertia is done through the act of forgiving. But they say in a different quote elsewhere, which I don't have in front of me, but they do mention that karma is when you act in consciously unloving ways. So it's not like you could be unconsciously unloving, and that's somewhat forgiven in a way, because you're not creating karma unless you're like consciously doing unloving things. So once you become aware of what it means to be a loving being, and then you still choose to act in a sort of negative way, well then you may be creating karma between yourself and other selves, and so avoid that. You may enact forgiveness both for yourself and for other selves, and that may stop the inertia of karma, which began with being consciously unloving. And so this is always a fun part too. Often when we talk about faith and the infinity path, but mainly faith, right? The word that comes to mind is like the cross, or the symbol that comes to mind is maybe the cross, or whatever your sort of religious slant is. Most religions tend to have some sort of manifestation of this type of lesson. And so I'll just use the cross because it's an easy one to use and most people are familiar with it. It's just like the letter T, the lowercase t. Okay, so what is this lowercase t, and how does it symbolize faith, and sort of what does that mean, etc., etc.? Well, I shall read you this portion from 80.20, and then I will explain it in a moment. They mention that which you call the sarcophagus in your system, in other words, like symbolizing death and transformation, in your system may be seen to be the material world, if you will. This material world is transformed by the Spirit into that which is infinite and eternal. The infinity of spirit is an even greater realization than the infinity of consciousness. For consciousness which has been disciplined by will and faith is that consciousness which may contact intelligent infinity directly. There are many things which fall away in the many, many steps of adepthood. We of Ra still walk these steps and praise the one infinite creator at each transformation. Continuing on about the cross and the sacrifice in session 93.24, they mention the cross indicating that nature of manifestation which may be only valued by the losing. Thus, the crux ansata, or the ankh, but the ankh is very close to the cross, is intended to be seen as an image of the eternal in and through manifestation and beyond manifestation through the sacrifice and transformation of that which is manifest. So, end of quote. Getting really fancy there. Think of the cross and its vertical pole. It goes up and down, right? So, and before it gets to the horizontal portion, the very bottom of the cross, I see that as the symbolization of our third density, or maybe the first three densities, 1, 2, and 3. And those are the very, physical densities like the earth and our current experience and everything that you can see in physical creation. So this physical creation is transformed through the losing of it, right? When in the sarcophagus, or in other words, when you pass on, that manifestation is transformed from the finite into the infinite, as they say, is intended to be seen as an image of the eternal in and through manifestation and beyond manifestation, through the sacrifice and transformation of that which is manifest. So the bottom vertical pole is that which is manifest, but as it is sort of transformed into the horizontal pole with a 90-degree turn from the bottom to the side, that is us transforming this physical manifestation into sort of the metaphysical lessons. In other words, we are pulling, I suppose, love and light and understanding and faith from the physical manifestation, from our experience here on third density Earth. We don't just go and eat and live and die and not think about love at all, right? We use our lessons and we use our catalyst to grow faith within us, to become better people, to open our hearts, to do whatever it may be along those lines. That is what I'm trying to explain here, that is how you transform this experience into an infinite experience. And then maybe you understand why they say now that to have faith is how you move on from this density, right? That Jesus guy, he says it a lot, right? You may not come to the Father except through me. And to me, that is what they're symbolizing here with the cross, is that faith and that love and that understanding, which can transform this current experience from one of sort of darkness and confusion into one of faith and love and a will that wants to push on towards the infinite. So let me talk about how powerful that really is too. In our current experience, in our third density, we must have faith that an outcome is possible, right? So we have certain catalysts, we have certain experiences that come our way, and if we are conscious enough and we use our will and our faith, we can transform our experience even before we may pass on from this density, right? We can transform it in the here and now. And so they're going to give an example here about fasting, about how, when somebody is going to do a fast, they're essentially they're having faith that an outcome, a positive outcome, is possible from them putting their body through this type of thing. Other than just the scientific portions about why fasting may be good for you in terms of ridding your body of this and this and this, but there is a spiritual or a metaphysical portion to this technique, let's say, that shouldn't be forgotten. Because in my opinion, actually, without the faith and the will that something is going to happen, then nothing will happen, right? You could fast, but if you don't really have any faith in the outcome that's, this is going to be a positive thing for you, then maybe nothing will happen. And so even then, you can take it to an opposite side and say that technically you don't even have to fast if your will and your faith is pointed in enough of a strong direction, and your focus of attention is on that in a constant manner. Transformations can happen seemingly without doing some type of fasting or whatever. So I shall read you this quote. In session 42.12, the questioner asks, in the last session you said, the self, if conscious to a great enough extent of the workings of the catalyst of fasting and the techniques of programming, may through concentration of the will and the faculty of faith alone cause reprogramming without the analogy of fasting, diet, or other analogous body complex disciplines. What are the techniques of programming which the higher self uses to ensure that the desired lessons are learned or attempted by the third density self in our third density incarnational laboratory? Ra answers, I'm Ra. There is but one technique for this growing or nurturing of will and faith, and that is the focusing of attention. The attention span of those you call children is considered short. The spiritual attention span of most of your peoples is that of the child. Thus, it is a matter of wishing to become able to collect one's attention and to hold it upon the desired programming. This, when continued, strengthens the will. The entire activity can only occur when there exists faith that an outcome of this discipline is possible. End of quote. And so you see, my friends, this is sort of relevant, even just talking about healing in general, that, as you're attempting any path of healing, if you do not have the faith and the will to understand that there is a possibility of a positive outcome, then likely nothing is going to happen. And I'll go like a step further to say that it is absolutely necessary that you do have faith, and the faith is almost like the match that lights the fire. Without it, there is no fire, right? You need that faith in order to bring out that transformational magic that is ever so possible in this infinite experience that we are in, even though when you look outside, you mostly just see a lot of finite things. This can't really be understood except through experience. You can tell everyone that you'd like about faith and magic and the will and all of that, but if you haven't experienced it yourself firsthand, then you may just not believe it. And as much as my scientific mind cringes at it, you sometimes have to fake it till you make it, right? You sometimes fake it a few times, and then eventually your faith and your will become to a certain level of purity, and you start to see the manifestations of the power of your will. Your will and your faith shall not be understated. It is one of the most important aspects of yourself, is one of the most important things that brings things to you. It is the will, right? If without a will, there is no way. If there is a will, there is a way. Do you think that those sayings just came out of nowhere all willy-nilly like that? Whenever we have a saying that sticks around for a long period of time and everyone seems to know it, there usually is some sort of truth behind it. So my friends, if there is a will or faith, there is a way. And even though in your face there may be those 99 containers in the store which are filled with hopelessness and darkness and suffering, there is that one container in the store filled with harmony, love, light, and joy. And I just don't want you to turn your back on it. That doesn't mean that you should only be acting in a way as if that one container is the only possibility that's going to happen, right? There is within this foolhardiness and this faith building that you will be challenged. You will try to do things and you will fail. And that is probably, in my opinion, a challenge for your faith. Right now, I have been doing, this podcast and my Instagram and sharing the Law of One with many people, and I've had many times where I go up and down and up and down, and I have my dark times where I seem to faith is on low, and it's hard to continue on, and you just sort of want to give up and be hopeless. And I understand, I'm not trying to discount any of those feelings. I absolutely deal with them. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. The more you try to be a better person, the more that you see, all the difficult and all the suffering and just all the issues of the world and the issues of yourself and all of those things to worry about. And I hope I'm not just speaking to the wind, making things up, but I really do believe that if there is will, there's a way, and I do have faith that this experience shall hopefully, manifest in a positive way for this earth and for the people of it, and that we don't just go down some terrible spiral of negativity where we're all enslaved and filled with sadness and no hope and all that stuff. So, you can think of my podcasts and my Instagram and my attempts at sharing the law of one as a demonstration of my faith that I do not want to discount the power of many people having faith together, and my hope is in sharing this law of one and this love and these understandings with all of you that you can enact your own faith, and it can hopefully give you the strength to push through these seeming difficult and dark times, especially over the last few years. I don't know about you guys, but the more the illusion gets intense and more intense, the more that I find it somewhat difficult to keep pushing on myself. But there's wonderful people out there who also try to remind me of the goodness of what you're doing, right? I see them as the one container in the store that is opened, and they remind me that don't worry about those other 99 containers. All is well, we're doing our best, and what more can we do, my friends? And so, yeah, I hope that this gives you a little bit of hope, a little bit of faith, a little bit of love and joy to go on with your day. You're not alone in your suffering. You may also see other people suffering in those 99 containers in the store of hopelessness as opportunities to serve, opportunities to demonstrate faith, to look at the very difficult illusion which says you must accept this finite experience and be a cog in the machine, and I say no. I say our lives are bigger than that, and even if it doesn't mean that it has to be something super fancy in your life, but just knowing of the positive intention of love and the magic that can come with it, and through the will and the faith, the manifestation of that positivity is unmatched. Like when you experience it in your life and you get to have a bit of that feedback from the universe, that having this faith and making that first step off the cliff to only be lifted up right at the very last second when you thought you were going to fall, it happens, my friends. It's possible. Infinite possibilities of the moment must never be discounted. For when we forget them, we become hopelessness, we become nihilistic, and we fall into that pit of despair. And I don't want you to be in that pit of despair. And often when I'm talking to you, I'm just talking to myself. I'm basically giving myself pep talks in these podcasts. And so I also understand that, a lot of people tell me, I seem to resonate a lot with everything that you talk about and everything that you post. It seems to be on point with my experience. Well, my friends, let me tell you what, I am no perfect person over here. I am going through all these similar things. In fact, everything that I usually talk about are things that I'm struggling with or trying to accept in my own way. So much love to all of you out there. I'm sorry I missed last week's podcast. As I said, I was dealing with my own pit of despair, and sometimes to accept that, I just need to accept the moment and feel it out and understand how it feels, and then pick myself up and continue on as I am doing today. And so, my friends and fellow seekers, I love you so much. Thank you for listening. If you can give this podcast a like, that helps with the algorithm and having other people see it, getting into other people's lives. You can leave me a comment. I like to read all of them. And if you find value in what I do, I would appreciate if you could jump on my Patreon, shoot me a one-time PayPal. I seek to freely give all of this information and do not want to put it behind a paywall, but I am human and need sustenance. And so, if you could assist me in that manner, if you have a little bit of abundance to spare, it is very much appreciated. And if you do not, absolutely no worry at all. I love you all regardless and equally, and I only just want you to gain something from this, whatever that may be. And so thank you, my friends. It is theoneinfinitecreator.com, and you just scroll down a little bit till you see the support section. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and please have that faith to continue on. Take care.